It started the day Andre Harris moved into the Maple Ridge gated community. A Saturday morning, crisp sunlight, birds chirping, and a moving truck rolling up to Lot 14, the house on the hill with the wraparound porch and lake view. The house had been empty for months, and now, finally, a new face was arriving. Andre, a tall, sharp-suited black man in his early 50s, stepped out of a black Escalade with calm purpose. His posture was regal but unassuming. He wore a gray hoodie and jeans. Nothing flashy, just a man unloading boxes. But to some, that's all he was. To others, it was already a problem. She made a note, check on Lot 14. That night, Andre stood on his back deck, looking out at the private lake, sipping tea. Peaceful. He hadn't lived anywhere this quiet in years. Within hours, the group chat for Maple Ridge buzzed with activity. Anyone know who moved into Lot 14? Looks like a rental? Escalade out-of-state plates. He didn't wave when I drove by. Kinda rude. By dusk, the HOA president Beverly Kelton, known by most as Karen in Chief, had received 3 concerned messages. He didn't know yet that the HOA had already filed their first report against him. Day 2, the introduction Sunday morning brought sunshine and suspicion. Andre dressed in slacks and a polo and took a walk through the neighborhood. Kids rode bikes, couples walked dogs, and everyone stared just a second too long. He smiled, nodded. One man returned the nod. We like to keep the neighborhood clean. Everyone else either turned away or whispered behind him. At the clubhouse, he introduced himself to a group gathered for the weekly HOA coffee meet. Good morning, Andre said. Just moved into 14. I'm Andre. It claimed his garbage bins were visible from the street. Despite being inside his garage, he ignored it. Figured it was a mistake. The driver, a man in his 60s wearing aviator sunglasses, snapped a photo of Andre, then drove off. Awkward silence. One woman offered a handshake. Karen just smiled tightly. Hello. We didn't realize that house had sold. A woman was standing at the edge of his driveway, recording a video of his lawn. It was Karen. It was a quiet listing, Andre replied. Karen forced a laugh. Well, we're glad you're here. We just ask that all new residents review the HOA handbook, especially the appearance codes. Andre tilted his head. Anything specific I should know? She waved her hand. Just the usual. No street parking. No flags or banners. No modifications to your mailbox. Got it, Andre said, suppressing a smirk. Sounds simple enough? We walked away. Karen watched, already suspicious. Day 3. The first incident Monday morning. Andre opened his front door to find a folded paper tucked into the mailbox. Violation notice. Later that afternoon, while planting flowers in his front yard, a white SUV slowed in front of his house. That evening, his Ring camera pinged. He stepped out. Can I help you? She flinched, then plastered on a smile. Oh, just checking the curb line. We've had drainage issues. Months passed since the downfall of Maple Ridge's corrupt HOA board. And yet the ripples from Andre Harris's story continued to surge far beyond the neighborhood's manicured hedges. The reluctant face of a growing movement. Civil rights organizations invited him to advisory roles. State legislatures called for his testimony. A documentary crew proposed a full-length feature titled Behind the Gates. The national spotlight may have dimmed, but what was sparked inside the gates had ignited something far larger. A nationwide reckoning with HOA power abuse. Because for every microphone handed to him, there was a voice that had never been heard. For every headline, a homeowner too afraid to speak out. Its mission was simple, but ambitious. Create a database of HOA abuses. Provide legal resources to residents, and advocate for reform legislation. Andre found himself in unfamiliar territory not as a defendant, not even as a board president, but as a symbol. He didn't seek the attention, but he didn't shy away from it either. The network forms. Andre co-founded a national organization, GATE, gaining accountability through equity. Within weeks, stories poured in. A single mother fined for having her children's bikes on the porch. He connected people with pro bono attorneys. He showed up in person when it mattered. A disabled veteran sued over a wheelchair ramp. An immigrant family forced to repaint their door after placing a cultural symbol. Andre read each one. He shared them on Gates' website and social media, amplifying the silenced. Calm, articulate, and filled with first-hand insight, he painted a picture of unchecked power in communities built on promises of peace. Legislation inspired by Maple Ridge Andre's testimony in front of the State Oversight Committee drew national coverage. HOAs are supposed to enhance neighborhoods, he told lawmakers, but without oversight, they become miniature dictatorships. His proposals included mandated transparency in all HOA financials, term limits for board members, penalties for discriminatory enforcement of violations, state-funded ombudsman offices to mediate disputes. The bills passed, other states took notice. Karen's fallout continues. While Andre built, Karen unraveled. Months passed since the downfall of Maple Ridge's corrupt HOA board. And yet the ripples from Andre Harris's story continued to surge far beyond the neighborhood's manicured hedges. The national spotlight may have dimmed, but what was sparked inside the gates had ignited something far larger. A nationwide reckoning with HOA power abuse. Andre found himself in unfamiliar territory, not as a defendant, not even as a board president, but as a symbol, the reluctant face of a growing movement. Civil rights organizations invited him to advisory roles. State legislatures called for his testimony. Because for every microphone handed to him, there was a voice that had never been heard. For every headline, a homeowner too afraid to speak out. A documentary crew proposed a full-length feature titled Behind the Gates. Network forums, he didn't seek the attention, but he didn't shy away from it either. His mission was simple but ambitious. Create a database of HOA abuses, provide legal resources to residents, and advocate for reform legislation. Andre co-founded a national organization, GATE, gaining accountability through equity. Within weeks, stories poured in. A single mother fined for having her children's bikes on the porch. A disabled veteran sued over a wheelchair ramp. Immigrant family forced to repaint their door after placing a cultural symbol. Andre read each one. He shared them on GATE's website and social media, amplifying the silenced. He connected people with pro bono attorneys, showed up in person when it mattered. Other states took notice. Legislation inspired by Maple Ridge Andre's testimony in front of the State Oversight Committee drew national coverage, calm/articulate, and filled with first-hand insight. He painted a picture of unchecked power in communities built on promises of peace. HOAs are supposed to enhance neighborhoods, he told lawmakers. But without oversight, they become miniature dictatorships. His proposals included mandated transparency in all HOA financials, term limits for board members, penalties for discriminatory enforcement of violations, state-funded ombudsman offices to mediate disputes. The bills passed. Karen's fallout continues. While Andre built, Karen unraveled. Thunderous applause followed. Andre was unanimously elected interim HOA president. Rebuilding with purpose. Andre implemented sweeping reforms. Monthly financials were posted online. Contracts required multiple bids. Every violation now included photo evidence and a chance to appeal. He disbanded the decor committee, which had been used to enforce Karen's personal aesthetic. Slowly, the neighborhood transformed not in appearance, but in soul. Instead, he established a cultural diversity group to celebrate different traditions, flags, holidays, and languages. He hired a third-party mediator to review past violations. Dozens were overturned. Residents who had paid unfair fines received refunds. The media spotlight faded, but Andre's work didn't. A call beyond the gates. People targeted by HOAs for their appearance, beliefs, or silence. He was invited to speak at conferences. Articles quoted him. Podcasts interviewed him. HOAs were meant to protect communities, not control them. When power loses accountability, it loses legitimacy. And legitimacy is the foundation of law. Andre began receiving emails from people across the country. Stories like his. Andre hesitated. He had just begun to heal, to rest. One invitation stood out. A panel on HOA power and reform hosted by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. But Celeste's voice echoed in his mind. Use your voice when others can tea. He accepted. At the panel, he told Maple Ridge's story not with bitterness, but resolve. The audience rose to their feet. Neighbors shared meals. People waved at Andre when he walked his dog. Back in Maple Ridge, kids played on sidewalks that had once been patrolled for chalk drawings. And though the castle had collapsed, a new kind of community had risen in its place, one where the gates were no longer weapons, but welcome signs. The Maple Ridge HOA office sat quietly nestled behind the community pool, but on Monday morning, it buzzed with unease. For years, the office had served as Karen's command center, a place where decisions were made in hushed tones, agendas manipulated, and violations weaponized. Under federal review, it was just another building housing secrets no longer safe. Andre's exposure of the HOA's misconduct set off a domino effect. The Inspector General's audit didn't stop at finances, it expanded to operations, board elections, and even contract approvals, security upgrades that were never installed, and a so-called neighborhood beautification fund that had paid for Karen's personal home renovations. A subpoena landed on the board's desk, requesting access to 5 years of documents. Satellite trucks camped outside the gates. Karen, once the queen of her cul-de-sac, was nowhere to be found. When investigators opened the books, what they found shocked even the most jaded legal observers. She was charged with embezzlement, conspiracy, and obstruction. Her arrest, recorded by a bystander, showed her screaming about being the victim. The video went viral. The HOA had funneled tens of thousands of dollars into private contracts, landscaping companies with no business licenses. Residents packed the community center. For the first time in years, the chairs were filled with real voices, not handpicked loyalists. One board member turned state witness, offering internal emails that detailed Karen's push to harass Andre. News outlets ate it up. Headlines like HOA scandal, rocks, Maple Ridge, and FBI deputy uncovers corruption in elite suburb-dominated regional coverage. "I didn't come here to run anything," he began, "but I do believe leadership is service. If you want transparency, accountability, and equity, I'll serve. But only if this board belongs to everyone." Legal fallout and power plays lawsuits followed. 3 residents filed class actions against the HOA for misuse of dues and targeting minorities. The public response was swift. Petitions formed demanding tighter regulation of HOA boards across the state. Lawmakers took note. One particularly damning exchange, Karen wrote, "He's too quiet. Makes me nervous. Keep the violations going. Something will stick." The federal investigation deepened. Karen's finances were frozen. Her resignation, filed under pressure, came too late to avoid consequences. Andre didn't comment. He didn't need to. Andre steps up the HOA, gutted from resignations and scandal, called an emergency town hall. A former board member stood and said, "We need someone we can trust, someone with a moral compass." The room turned to Andre. He stood, surprised. Karen tried to mount a counteroffensive. She claimed Andre had falsified documents, hinted he used his FBI badge to intimidate people, and even suggested the court had been influenced by federal pressure. But it didn't work. Not this time. The Office of the Inspector General opened an inquiry into HOA financials. A whistleblower from within the HOA board leaked emails showing misappropriated dues funds spent on personal landscaping, private travel, and even a $12,000 security gate upgrade that had never occurred. Andre didn't have to say a word. The facts spoke loud enough. Local protests formed, peaceful but pointed. Signs reading "Wrong house, wrong man," and "Justice isn't optional." Meanwhile, the officers faced scrutiny. The arresting officers, once smug in the courtroom, were now facing internal review. Body cam footage contradicted their official reports. The department's PR team scrambled. Andre received a call from the mayor. "Mr. Harris, I just wanted to personally apologize for what happened." People were hesitant at first, but when the smell of grilled ribs and cornbread filled the air, the turnout surprised even him. One man, tears in his eyes, said, "I served too. I should have had your back." "I don't need an apology," Andre replied. "I need change." Community barbecue. The turning point: Andre hosted a Saturday barbecue. He invited everyone, no exceptions. It's about trust, justice, and living next to people you actually know, not just see. Children played tag. Elderly neighbors shook his hand. Karen stayed in her house, watching from behind her blinds. Near the end of the night, Andre took the mic. "This isn't about me," he said. "An emergency re-election was scheduled. Karen announced she wouldn't run but filed under her maiden name. He was just beginning to realize his story wasn't unique. Across the country, HOAs like this existed. And maybe, just maybe, he was the one to bring those stories to light. A wave of applause followed. Again, the HOA implodes. 3 board members resigned that week. Andre caught it. He posted a screenshot on the community board with the caption, "Same playbook, different name." The post got over 400 likes. Karen was officially exposed. A week later, she quietly moved out. Maple Ridge began to heal. But for Andre, the storm wasn't over. Andre Harris didn't return to his home in Maple Ridge alone that night. His Escalade rolled back through the gate this time, opening without delay. Convoy of curiosity followed. Reporters, neighbors, peeking through curtains. And for the first time, the invisible gate of suspicion cracked. Andre's house, once a target, now stood as a symbol. But he didn't bask in the shift. Instead, he sat at his kitchen table that evening, scrolling through years of saved documents on his secure tablet. Not out of fear, out of preparation, because this wasn't over, not by a long shot. A Harvard Law graduate with military experience and an unmatched analytical mind, Andre had risen through the ranks faster than anyone predicted. He wasn't loud. He didn't crave attention. But he demanded respect the moment he spoke. Flashback. The making of a quiet powerhouse 10 years earlier, Andre stood in the Pentagon's secure briefing room, presenting to a joint counterterrorism task force. Residents demanded answers. Copies of violation letters began to circulate. Some neighbors who had once looked through Andre were now stopping by with muffins and apologies. She released a formal HOA statement claiming the arrest had been a misunderstanding, and that the HOA valued diversity and integrity. It only made things worse. Screenshots of her old messages leaked. Its comments like "he looks like trouble," and "keep an eye on that one," exposed the ugly truth. Others remained silent but watched. He'd met his wife, Celeste, during his early FBI training. She was a surgeon, equally brilliant. They were unstoppable together, till her cancer diagnosis came like a thief in the night. When she passed, Andre finished one final case, turned in his badge temporarily, and bought the home she had circled in a magazine years before. Maple Ridge. Her dream. Their supposed sanctuary. He never expected it to become his battlefield. Back in the present, a neighborhood unravels within 48 hours of the court hearing. The Maple Ridge HOA group chat transformed into chaos. Karen tried to save face. Andre stayed silent, till a local journalist interviewed him briefly for a podcast. When asked what his plans were, he said, "I believe communities thrive on transparency. It's time people see how some HOAs operate under the surface, checked, unregulated, and deeply biased." The clip went viral. Karen's strategy crumbles. One of the arresting officers was called to the stand. "I've served in this county 14 years, he said proudly. When we arrived, the subject was combative, evasive, and refused to identify himself. Andre remained silent. He reached into a thin black folder and withdrew a small leather badge wallet. Without a word, he handed it to the bailiff. She flipped it open. Her expression changed in an instant. The judge turned to him. "Mr. Harris, you have the floor. Would you like to make a statement?" Andre rose slowly, deliberately. The courtroom murmured. The bailiff approached the bench and handed it to the judge. "Deputy Director Andre Harris," she read aloud. "Federal Bureau of Investigation. You didn't verify this man's identity?" Silence. Karen's jaw dropped. Prosecutor blinked twice. The officers on the side shifted uncomfortably. This case isn't just about a false accusation. It's about systemic targeting, abuse of HOA authority, an unlawful detainment based on racial profiling. "I kept my identification private because I wanted to see how far this would go," Andre said clearly. The judge looked back at the prosecutor. "He wouldn't provide it, Your Honor. I want statements from all parties and a full investigation launched into the arrests made by these officers. This reeks of targeted harassment." As Andre exited, someone shouted, "Is it true you're with the FBI?" Andre interjected. "I asked for a supervisor with federal clearance. They refused." The judge's gavel cracked down. "Case dismissed." Karen gasped. Furthermore, the judge added, "I am ordering an immediate review of the HOA's conduct." The officers turned pale. Andre returned to his seat, calm as ever. Outside the courthouse, a few reporters waited. Word had leaked. The caption read, "Authority means nothing without accountability." He turned, nodded, and said, "No comment." But the story had already started to spread. Karen scrambled to delete HOA group chat messages. Board members began texting privately. Residents started whispering not about Andre but about Karen. Later that evening, Andre posted one image to his social media. A photo of his HOA violation slip stacked like a fan. Within hours, it was trending. And Maple Ridge was about to become famous for all the wrong reasons. The courtroom smelled faintly of lemon disinfectant and stale coffee. Andre Harris sat at the defense table, his hands folded, wrists still sore from the cuffs used just days prior. The prosecution table buzzed with energy. Karen sat directly behind the prosecutors, lips curled in smug satisfaction. The public defender assigned to him looked unsure, shifting nervously beside him. She whispered to a fellow board member, both chuckling like schoolchildren. "Not yet. This hearing will come to order. State your case." Two officers who had arrested Andre stood confidently near the bench, shoulders square, arms crossed, ready to tell their version of the threat. Andre had remained mostly silent since his arrest. He hadn't contacted a lawyer. He hadn't called anyone. "You sure you don't want to speak, Mr. Harris?" The young lawyer whispered. This defendant, known to any of the residents, threatened a member of the homeowners association, used hostile language, and created a public safety concern. Multiple neighbors have submitted statements describing erratic behavior. Andre gave a small smile. The judge, a tall woman with reading glasses and no patience for theatrics, entered. The prosecutor launched into a dramatic tale. Karen nodded along. She looked absolutely victorious. "Where's your evidence of threats?" the judge asked. The prosecutor blinked. "We have a sworn statement from Ms. Beverly Kelton." "Any video? Audio?" "No, Your Honor. The incident occurred inside the defendant's garage, yet you claim the entire neighborhood was disturbed." "His presence alone was intimidating to some," the prosecutor said flatly. The judge's eyes narrowed. Andre didn't buy it. "Film all your neighbors when checking for drainage." Karen stiffened. "I have the authority to inspect the property line." The next day he received a second violation notice. Unauthorized landscaping. Flower beds not pre-approved. Not without notice. Not mine. She huffed and walked off. They turned toward him. "This is my house. I have ID. My name is Andre Harris." Hands hovered near belts. Day 6. The call sure. Andre returned from the grocery store to find two police cruisers idling outside his home. Officers stood on his lawn. Karen was speaking to them. As Andre pulled in, "Sir, suspicious?" "We got a report of suspicious activity," Andre said flatly. Andre was in his garage, tuning up his old motorcycle. Music was low, his garage door half open. At 11:03 a.m., Karen appeared with two officers. Said one officer. Called it in, wrench in hand. "What?" "Everything cleared. We need to ask you some questions." Claimed it didn't look like he belonged here. Andre raised an eyebrow. "I was just concerned. With all the break-ins lately, someone saw a man entering the home through the back." Andre exhaled slowly. Karen chimed in. Andre said calmly, "And I'd like to speak to someone with federal clearance," he said. She said he was yelling threats. "My daughter heard it. There haven't been any break-ins." The officer checked his license. "Sorry for the confusion. He said he'd take care of me his way. That's what I heard." One moved behind Andre. Andre nodded. He didn't sleep that night. Day 10. The arrest was supposed to be a normal Friday. "This is him." Andre looked up. Didn't shout. Simply repeated. The officers approached. "About what?" "I didn't threaten anyone." "Verbal threats against a neighbor?" Andre shook his head. Karen pointed. The officers didn't wait. "You're being detained for questioning." I want your badge numbers." The officers exchanged glances. "Excuse me?" Andre didn't resist as they cuffed him. "Make sure your supervisor knows this won't end well." Karen smiled smugly. And that's where the story should have ended for most people like him. But Andre Harris wasn't most people. He was the FBI's deputy director. And the next chapter would turn this quiet community upside down.